In the depths of human experience, where consciousness and the subconscious converge, one of psychology's greatest thinkers, Carl Jung, left behind a teaching whose wisdom has been passed down through generations, illuminating the most complex aspects of our existence. According to his profound insights, pain is never a random occurrence, much less a punitive act of fate. On the contrary, it represents nothing less than a powerful, piercing signal, a call emanating from the deepest recesses of our being. This call urgently compels each of us to pause amidst life's hustle, listen to its silent messages, and thoughtfully reflect on the path we are treading. The discomfort, the profound unease that people so often choose to ignore or suppress, exists not to condemn us to suffering, but to awaken us to a fuller awareness. Recall those moments in life when it seemed the world around you was crumbling, and each day brought only new challenges. During those periods when the future was shrouded in an impenetrable veil of uncertainty, and the much-desired answers never came, did you ever consider that perhaps these crises were granted not to break your spirit, but to reveal something fundamental about yourself? Jung was unwavering in his conviction that suffering is not merely an inevitable part of existence, but also a powerful tool for inner transformation. Every tear shed, every bitter disappointment, and every irreplaceable loss possesses an astonishing capacity to lead us to a deeper, more authentic understanding of who we truly are, liberating the hidden facets of ourself. Too often, humanity lives as if trapped in an endless cycle of external expectations, desperately trying to fit into rigid frameworks that utterly fail to reflect our true essence. There's a widespread belief that one must always be strong, that any display of vulnerability is an undeniable sign of weakness. But what if the truth lies in something entirely different? What if it is precisely in moments of greatest fragility, when strength seems to be at its end, that an unimaginable, hitherto undiscovered power resides, capable of changing everything? Jung, the eminent thinker, asserted that a fundamental step towards inner healing and personal growth lies in directly engaging with those aspects of the self that are typically repressed: insecurity, deep fears, and the so-called shadows. These suppressed elements do not dissolve into nothingness when ignored. On the contrary, they gain hidden power, subtly shaping an individual's reality in ways that are not always consciously perceived. Have you ever noticed how you repeatedly find yourself in strikingly cyclical situations? Be it a sequence of romantic relationships or a series of decisions made, you might feel that you fall into the same persistent patterns time and again. Such coincidences are by no means accidental. Your unconscious, in essence, is persistently trying to convey an important message to you. Perhaps something is hidden within your being that needs to be directly confronted, something you diligently avoid, but which, once consciously processed, is capable of forever freeing you from these endless, recurring scenarios. The pain you experience should not be perceived as a hostile force. Rather, it is a wise mentor. Its existence is meant to guide you towards your own awakening, towards becoming a more authentic and complete version of yourself. However, to decipher the profound message of this pain, you need exceptional courage. This is the courage to stop running from yourself, the courage to face your inner world, and to accept the fact that, although the process may involve deep discomfort and inattention, the transformative outcome invariably justifies all the effort expended. Imagine, even for a brief moment, what it would be like to exist in complete harmony with your innermost truth, to live without needing to hide behind social masks, where you could be yourself without fear of judgment or rejection. This is the state Carl Jung called individuation, the process of becoming the unique person you are destined to be. However, it must be acknowledged that this path is not without significant challenges. It inevitably requires the courage to face one's inner shadows, to deeply explore one's innermost fears, and finally, to integrate into one's self all those aspects of personality that may have been denied or suppressed for a long time. There is a valid reason why some experiences leave a much deeper imprint on a person than others, or why certain encounters and situations seem to touch the deepest chords of their soul. Such phenomena are by no means coincidental. Rather, they are unequivocal messages from the depths of the individual's unconscious, clear signs that something within needs discovery, healing, or radical transformation. Jung was convinced that our unconscious communicates with us through universal symbols, subtle intuitive insights, and strong emotional responses. The inner discomfort one sometimes feels, or the inexplicable unease that cannot be ignored, all of this is nothing but the voice of one's own soul, persistently addressing them. However, herein lies the main catch. Modern society often teaches us to suppress this inner voice. People are constantly distracted by countless external noises, by the relentless demands of daily life, by the sometimes overwhelming expectations of others. An individual convinces themselves that there is no time for deep reflection, that there is a need for ceaseless forward movement without pauses or stops. By acting in this way, the person inevitably disconnects from their most essential and deepest part, that which constitutes the authentic foundation of their own self. When one decides to listen to their own inner suffering, refusing to suppress it, a process of truly miraculous changes begins. Answers previously sought in the external world start to emerge from the depths of one's own being. Their relationships with others, the decisions they make, and even their very perception of life undergo significant metamorphoses. This happens not because external reality has changed, but because profound changes have occurred within the person themselves. This is the true power of consciously confronting one's inner shadows. They possess the ability to transform the person from within. Most people spend their entire lives trying to avoid meeting themselves, fearing what they might discover if they dare to stop and look within. They are afraid to confront unhealed wounds from the past, the insecurity that paralyzes their will, and the mistakes they would rather forget forever. However, the eminent psychologist Carl Jung taught that true strength lies not in avoiding one's shadow aspects, but in fully embracing them. Only when an individual accepts all parts of their self, even those they consider dark or inappropriate, can true and deep transformation occur. Consider this for a moment. What aspects of your own life do you tend to avoid? Perhaps it's relationships that you realize are not beneficial, but you're afraid to end them. Perhaps it's a cherished dream you gave up on because it seemed too difficult to achieve, or because someone convinced you of your own inability. Whatever it may be, the first and crucial step on the path to healing is to sincerely acknowledge this fact. Carl Gustav Jung, the distinguished thinker, would argue that by rejecting certain aspects of one's personality, an individual unwittingly creates a deep rift between their conscious and unconscious self. This divergence, in his view, serves as the source of numerous inner contradictions that a person experiences. The resolution of such conflicts is seen not in endless struggle with oneself, but in sincere reconciliation, in the ability to heed the soul's deep messages that it strives to convey through the prism of pain. Intense emotional states, or cyclically recurring experiences that manifest repeatedly in life, are not something to flee from. From this unique perspective, suffering transforms into a valuable opportunity for personal development. One can imagine for a moment that every agonizing experience in a person's life is actually a message, a herald, designed to guide them toward a deeper understanding of their own essence and what they truly need to find happiness. Jung held the conviction that nothing in our existence is arbitrary or accidental. Every acquaintance, every challenge, every moment of jubilation or sorrow is endowed with its unique purpose. However, to unlock this hidden significance, the individual must be willing to look beyond the visible surface and delve into the innermost corners of their being. It is in this context that the concept of individuation gains its meaning. Jung characterized this process as a striving for wholeness, as a movement toward becoming the person one is destined to be. This path is not without difficulties and trials, but, according to his teachings, it is the only one capable of leading to a truly authentic and deeply meaningful life. Individuation does not imply achieving impeccability. Rather, it means consciously accepting one's imperfections and finding a harmonious balance between one's light and shadow aspects. It is the process of mastering the ability to coexist in harmony with oneself and with the world that surrounds one. One of the most significant obstacles to development is often fear. This feeling envelops a person, manifesting as a fear of change, apprehension about the unknown, and an unwillingness to part with the familiar, even when it's clear it has long ceased to be beneficial. While such anxiety is entirely natural, Carl Jung, the great thinker, taught that true growth is inextricably linked to a certain degree of uncertainty. This process is akin to moving along a dark, uncharted path. One doesn't know precisely where it will lead, but trusts that each subsequent step steadily brings them closer to the light. And it is at this juncture that many stop. They prefer to remain within the confines of the so-called comfort zone, even if this zone is filled with deep dissatisfaction and pain, simply because the prospect of confronting what might lie beyond seems too frightening. However, they overlook one key truth: the greatest risk lies not in exploring the unknown, but in remaining trapped in an existence that does not truly reflect their authentic essence. When an individual decides to bravely face their fears and resolutely step into the unknown, something truly amazing begins to happen. The fragments of life's puzzle gradually begin to fall into place, forming a unified, coherent picture. The very people whose presence is necessary for their further journey begin to appear in their surroundings. Opportunities that previously seemed absolutely unattainable or even unthinkable arise naturally, opening new horizons, and most importantly, the person achieves an inner peace and harmony, a state that was completely unfamiliar to them until that moment. The awareness and acceptance of one's inner aspects is not an instantaneous process that happens overnight. This undertaking requires significant time, considerable patience, and, crucially, unwavering commitment to oneself. Nevertheless, the ultimate outcome of this profound inner journey justifies every effort invested, because by reconciling with one's so-called shadows, that is, with the unrecognized or suppressed sides of the personality, one unlocks colossal strength and wisdom that have always resided within, awaiting recognition. This journey into the depths of one's self, to one's authentic essence, represents one of the bravest and most significant acts one can undertake. As an individual begins to openly confront their inner shadows and accept their fears, they gradually realize that pain, contrary to initial perceptions of it as an enemy, is actually a valuable ally, tirelessly pushing them toward personal growth and development. Carl Jung, the distinguished thinker, asserted that what you resist persists. This concise yet extraordinarily profound truth serves as a powerful reminder that whenever an individual avoids confronting a certain emotion, an unpleasant memory, or an uncomfortable truth about themselves, they unconsciously grant them even greater power over their own life. Just consider this statement. How many times have you avoided confronting a particular situation, driven by fear of possible consequences? Perhaps it was a difficult dialogue with a loved one, a responsible decision that was constantly postponed, or the need to make changes in your life that, though recognized as inevitable, seemed too burdensome and overwhelming. Unbeknownst to yourself, such an act of avoidance created a closed loop of anxiety, guilt, or deep disappointment, which continues to invisibly influence your daily existence. Carl Jung believed that human emotions are nothing less than deep messages from the unconscious. These signals, though at times uncomfortable, are fundamentally intended to foster an individual's personal growth. If one has the courage to stop and listen carefully to these inner voices, they can uncover the deepest truths about their own essence, which will ultimately lead to complete transformation. This is the true power of self-knowledge. It not only frees the individual from the invisible shackles of inner limitations, but also grants them genuine control over their own life path. Often, the so-called shadows of the psyche manifest precisely in interpersonal relationships. In the closest bonds, deep wounds, hidden insecurities, and suppressed behavioral patterns surface. Perhaps you have already noticed a tendency to attract people into your life who cause pain, or to constantly encounter the same conflict situations. This is by no means accidental. Such dynamics are merely a mirror reflection of what a person carries within themselves in the depths of their psyche. Jung termed this phenomenon projection, the act of seeing in others what one does not wish to acknowledge in oneself. For example, if an individual constantly feels neglected or ignored by others, this may be a sign that there is a part within them that feels insecure or was not properly recognized in the past. The key to resolving such situations lies not in blaming the other person, but in sincerely asking oneself, what is this experience teaching me? What inner wounds does my soul need to heal to stop projecting them onto others? When one begins to view their relationships from a different angle, profound changes occur. They stop perceiving disagreements and arguments as direct personal attacks and begin to see them as valuable opportunities for personal and interpersonal growth. The search for external culprits ceases, and instead the gaze turns inward in search of inner answers and solutions. Such a shift in focus not only transforms the nature of relationships, but also radically changes the individual's overall worldview. Undoubtedly, this path is not easy. It demands an unprecedented level of inner honesty, which may initially cause significant discomfort. However, it is precisely in this discomfort that the true potential for deep transformation lies. As Jung aptly noted, enlightenment is achieved not by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This implies that merely desiring to be better or happier is not enough. One must be willing to look into their inner essence and actively work on what is found there. The pain experienced in the past and the unhealed wounds that one carries do not represent insurmountable obstacles to happiness. On the contrary, they are fundamental building blocks from which an authentic and deeply meaningful life can be constructed. However, for this to happen, one must radically change their attitude towards suffering. Instead of perceiving it as something to be avoided at all costs, it should be treated as a wise teacher, capable of imparting valuable lessons and knowledge. A person's life at times resembles a great river carrying its waters through the landscapes of existence. When an individual tries to resist its natural flow, eddies and turbulence inevitably arise, symbolizing inner struggle. However, if one chooses to flow with this river, consciously perceiving both the calm currents and the unpredictable rapids, they begin to understand that every bend and every drop in elevation has its deep purpose. It is precisely such an approach to existence, filled with acceptance and awareness, that Carl Gustav Jung urges us to contemplate and embrace. Instead of fighting one's emotions or circumstances, he calls upon us to learn to interact with them, to heed their messages, and to allow them to guide us to where we are meant to be. The moment one dares to acknowledge their pain and integrate the so-called shadows, the repressed aspects of their self, a truly profound process of transformation unfolds within their being. The energy that was previously irrevocably spent on suppressing or avoiding unwanted emotions is now completely liberated. And with this revived energy, it becomes possible to concentrate on what truly holds primary importance: cherished dreams, deep relationships, and true purpose. It is as if, by releasing the accumulated burden of the past, one finally gains the space and clarity of vision to create the future they have always dreamed of. One should not underestimate the colossal impact of such inner work on a person's entire life. Jung asserted that when an individual transforms their inner world, the external world inevitably changes in its wake. The very people who are meant to play an important role begin to emerge on the horizon of existence. Opportunities that previously seemed completely unattainable unexpectedly become tangible realities. And most importantly, one finds an inner peace that no external circumstances can take away from them. This inner transformation affects not only a person's personal sphere, but also their way of interacting with the world around them. When an individual begins to heal their inner wounds and integrate their shadow aspects, they gain significant authenticity. They no longer need to resort to wearing masks to please others or hide their vulnerability, fearing judgment. They realize that their true power is rooted in the ability to be themselves without unnecessary apologies or pretense. And such authenticity undoubtedly possesses an attractive, almost magnetic effect. Others are drawn to individuals who are in harmony with themselves, those who are not afraid to demonstrate their true essence. This does not guarantee universal understanding or acceptance, but it does mean that those who resonate with one's inner truth and will offer support on their life path will be drawn to them. The renowned psychoanalyst Jung asserted that human relationships serve as mirrors, capable of reflecting both a person's strengths and their vulnerabilities. As soon as one begins deep inner work on themselves, the dynamics of their relationships with others also undergo significant changes. It is quite likely that in the past they may have had friendships or romantic ties that seemed to drain their vitality, constantly demanding more than they could offer in return. This type of interaction, though painful, represents a valuable opportunity to recognize one's own boundaries and determine the true value one places on oneself. When an individual decides to let go of what no longer resonates with their inner world, they not only get rid of a burdensome emotional load, but also open doors for fresh experiences and new connections. Initially, such a step can seem daunting. Parting with the familiar, even if harmful, inevitably creates a feeling of instability and uncertainty. However, the eminent thinker Jung reminds us that the emptiness that results is not something to be feared. On the contrary, it is a sacred womb in which something entirely new and viable can be born. As one progresses along this transformative path, they begin to notice an amazing and mysterious phenomenon known as synchronicity. Carl Gustav Jung characterized synchronicity as a meaningful, non-accidental coincidence. These are events that, at first glance, have no direct causal link, yet possess a deep, sometimes fateful significance in the individual's life. For example, one might suddenly think of someone, and a moment later that person unexpectedly calls them, or an individual discovers precisely the information they need, and at an absolutely ideal, timely moment. Such experiences are by no means simple coincidences. They serve as clear indicators that the individual is in deep harmony with their true purpose, and that their unconscious is actively contributing to their well-being. Synchronicity appears as the quiet voice of the universe, a cosmic whisper that confidently affirms, "Keep going, you're on the right path." However, to catch these subtle signs, an individual must be present in the here and now, demonstrating deep receptivity and an unbroken connection to their inner world. Instead of being consumed by external noise or giving in to anxieties about the future, one should allow themselves to fully dissolve into the present. It is important to heed one's intuition, pay close attention to emerging emotions, and trust the conviction that everything that happens has its deep and undeniable reason. This level of awareness, of course, is not achieved instantly. It is a continuous process, an endless journey of self-discovery that requires not only significant dedication, but also considerable patience. Along this path, there will inevitably be days when one feels confident progress, and other periods when it may seem that a retreat has occurred. This is completely normal and natural. Growth is not a linear process, and every step, even the most difficult and painful, is an integral part of personal evolution. One of the most significant tasks on this thorny path is mastering the art of forgiving oneself. Often the inner pain we carry stems not so much from what others have done to us, but from what we believe we ourselves have done wrong. People tend to judge themselves for past decisions, for mistakes made, and for missed opportunities. However, Jung taught that the past in no way defines a person's current essence. What truly matters is the decision made and the action taken today. The act of forgiveness, especially self-forgiveness, is rightfully considered one of the most liberating deeds available to the human soul. This should not be interpreted as justifying past mistakes or as indifference to their subsequent results. On the contrary, it is a deep awareness and acceptance of the fact that, at that specific moment in time, the individual acted using the full extent of available information and means. This perspective allows an individual not only to extract valuable lessons from their mistakes, but also to move forward unhindered, freed from the heavy burden of guilt. The moment an individual decides to forgive themselves marks a profound inner transformation. The accumulated emotional baggage that weighed them down begins to dissipate, giving way to a new sense of lightness and inner clarity. This newfound clarity of mind empowers a person to view their existence from an entirely different angle. Instead of habitually dwelling on past failures and mistakes, they begin to clearly discern the multitude of perspectives and opportunities now unfolding before them. This is where the key truth that the eminent thinker Jung sought to convey to every person becomes apparent. All the necessary resources for transforming one's life are already inherently within the individual. There is no need to search for these resources in the external world, nor to await anyone's permission to achieve a state of true happiness. A person possesses the inherent power to choose their own reaction to every life experience, to interpret every event that occurs, and thereby actively shape the contours of their future. Pain, despite its discomfort, serves as a unique instrument, constantly reminding a person of their inner strength. It acts as a signal, indicating an individual's ability to cope with any challenge and transform every difficulty into a valuable opportunity. This is clear evidence that the individual is alive, actively developing, and on the path to self-awareness. As people delve deeper into this process of transformation, they begin to understand that true power lies not in striving for complete control over what happens around them, but rather in their ability to choose their reaction to these events. This profound postulate is one of the most important lessons bequeathed to us by Carl Jung. The power of human perception, as well as thoughts, emotions, and deeply ingrained beliefs, entirely determines how an individual experiences and lives their life. And while people cannot always fully control external factors, they invariably possess the ability to choose how to interpret these circumstances and what meaning to assign to them. Consider the most challenging life experiences people have ever faced. Perhaps it involves moments of loss, feelings of rejection, or bitter defeats. At that specific moment, these situations might have seemed insurmountable obstacles, but now, in retrospect, one likely realizes that such experiences taught them something invaluable. Perhaps they strengthened their spirit, imparted wisdom, or fostered greater compassion. This is the subtle gift of suffering. It stimulates humanity to develop in ways previously unimagined. Carl Gustav Jung asserted that every individual possesses their own unique destiny, a singular life path prepared for them alone. However, to find this path, one must first free themselves from the numerous distractions and external expectations imposed upon them. This process requires considerable courage, as it entails deep self-knowledge, confronting one's own fears and doubts. It means listening to that inner voice which is often suppressed because people fear what it might reveal. This voice, which is none other than a person's intuition, acts as the most powerful guide available to them. It communicates not through words but through subtle sensations, through that barely perceptible premonition that infallibly indicates the rightness or wrongness of something. But to perceive its whisper, complete self-trust is required. And it is at this stage that many individuals encounter insurmountable difficulties. For a long time they sought external approval and validation, and as a result lost the ability to rely on their own judgment. The current world persistently instills in people the belief that true answers should be sought outside themselves. In the virtual space of social media, in the recommendations of others, in the strict rules dictated by society. However, Carl Jung tirelessly reminds us that the answers sought are not there at all. They are hidden deep within each person. And to discover these treasures of inner wisdom, one must completely abstract themselves from external informational noise and reconnect with their authentic, profound essence. Such a worldview does not imply complete withdrawal from society or a categorical disregard for all external viewpoints. On the contrary, it points to the urgent need to develop the ability to selectively approach incoming information, to carefully analyze what is heard, and to clearly distinguish between ideas that resonate with one's inner world and those that do not find any resonance within. This implies that individual, deeply personal truth must take precedence over external expectations and imposed notions. Essentially, such an attitude is a manifestation of genuine self-worth and deep self-respect, an act of unconditional love for one's own personality. And, like any other manifestation of true love, this process requires consistent practice and unwavering patience. As soon as an individual begins to build their life based on the principles of their own authenticity and true self, they discover that virtually all aspects of their existence undergo radical changes. Decision-making gains astonishing clarity, interpersonal relationships become deeply meaningful and significantly more significant, and obstacles and challenges arising on the path no longer seem as daunting as before. Of course, this does not mean that the journey of life will become absolutely flawless or that one will cease to encounter inevitable trials. However, it guarantees that they will acquire inner strength, unshakable clarity of thought, and the necessary wisdom to overcome any difficulties with remarkable grace and unwavering self-confidence. The renowned psychologist Carl Gustav Jung, in his works, emphasized the exceptional importance of integrating all components of the human personality. He advocated for the acceptance of both the light and shadow aspects of our being, as well as our strengths alongside our weaknesses. It is precisely such a comprehensive process of inner integration that opens up the possibility for an individual to lead a truly fulfilling and deeply authentic life, free from internal contradictions. The essence of this approach lies not in attempting to eradicate or eliminate one's imperfections, but in their unconditional acceptance as integral elements of one's identity, forming each person's uniqueness. For only when a person achieves complete and unconditional self-acceptance do they gain the true ability to accept others around them with the same unconditional empathy and understanding, with all their peculiarities and differences. In this context, interpersonal relationships serve as fertile ground for personal development. Every interaction, be it a minor conversation or a serious confrontation, every conflict and every deep emotional attachment, represents a unique opportunity for an individual to understand themselves and the world around them more deeply. When a person achieves inner harmony and reconciliation with their self, their relationships with others inevitably reflect this state of calm and wholeness. They cease to seek validation or a way to fill internal gaps in others. Instead, from a state of inner fulfillment and genuine connection, they begin to share their life with others. This path to discovering one's authentic self is not without its difficulties, but it promises the most significant and profound rewards a person can embark upon. And it is important to remember that the very first, decisive step in this transformative journey always begins with the individual themselves. One is invited to take time for deep self-analysis to reflect on the areas of their life that require close attention, the emotions that have long been suppressed, and the decisions they have avoided making. One might ask, what would happen if they dared to confront these aspects of their being instead of continuing to ignore them? What new horizons and opportunities might open up before them if they show enough courage to be absolutely honest with themselves? The answers to these profound questions can serve as a starting point for a comprehensive transformation, capable of influencing not only one's own life, but also the lives of those around them. For when a person chooses to live in harmony with their authentic truth, they inadvertently inspire others to follow their example. This is where the true power of their authenticity lies. It has the ability to transform not only a person's inner world, but also their external reality. Following the path to authenticity, as described by the distinguished thinker Carl Jung, represents one of the most profound and transformative decisions a person can dare to make. It is not an easy path, full of challenges, but it is the indispensable route leading an individual to a truly fulfilling and meaningful existence. Encountering the hidden aspects of one's personality, the so-called shadows, attentively listening to the inner voice of intuition, and consciously accepting the full scope of one's nature, including both its light and dark facets, grant a person unprecedented strength. The essence of this process lies not in the pursuit of mythical perfection, but in absolute honesty towards one's own essence, in reconciliation with every element of one's being, and in allowing oneself to exist in full accordance with one's inner truth. When an individual decides to walk this path, they not only transform their own existence, they also make a significant contribution to global change. Their authenticity serves as a powerful source of inspiration for others on their path to their own authenticity. The courage demonstrated in confronting one's own fears stimulates those around them to similar actions. This creates a so-called domino effect for universal awakening. By choosing to live in accordance with their inner truth, A person enables others to also shed the unseen shackles that bind their potential and freedom. Now, the responsibility for further action rests on each individual's shoulders. One is invited to deeply reflect on the information presented and ponder its significance. One might ask, what is their pain trying to convey to them? What part of their self have they been ignoring or actively suppressing? And most importantly, what concrete steps can they take today to make a confident stride towards their truth? It is crucial to constantly remember the fundamental principle: a person's authenticity is their undeniable and greatest source of power. It is in the sincerity of one's being and uniqueness that the inner strength manifests, which serves as the foundation for achieving significant goals and overcoming any obstacles.